these are gene responses that occur. There's something called an immediate early gene response. I just want to show you that there is data, evidence behind all of this, that it's not just a fad. Oh yeah, neuroplasticity, all right, just like omega-3s, which I love omega-3, and they have a lot of research, but it's an actual scientific principle that we're seeing. Synaptogenesis, another physiological aspect that occurs. Again, that's building those new arms, those new connections. What I do want to hit at with some of this is that neuroplasticity has to be very targeted, meaning that, you know, if we're working on a specific part of the brain, that is the area where we look at, you know, executive control and those types of things. So if we're trying to really target the front of the brain with a specific type of therapy, we got to make sure we're doing that, something that we know that stimulates that part of the brain. The therapy can't be such that we're going to work on something that would stimulate the temporal lobe or the occipital lobe, right? It has to be specific to the frontal lobe. And then on top of that specificity, it has to be very highly repetitive, repeated, well-timed, that type of thing. So we're going to get into like how many repetitions we're seeing in the literature that is required to make a change in the system. The good thing is it doesn't have to be the same exact therapy over and over and over again. You can vary the therapies to create the same effect so that the child doesn't get kind of bored, right? Another thing we'll see in rehab is that you want to keep therapies novel, new, changing them, even within the session is really important because the brain responds to that. It doesn't like to have the same thing over, the same order of things. So we will see that when we're trying to induce neuroplasticity, that we try to do things sometimes in a multifactorial manner, or we'll combine 2 or 3 different therapies in one because we get a bigger bang for the buck in the brain. It's a more profound level of activation. Sometimes we may activate the brain in a certain manner while doing a task that that person has difficulty with. So I'll give you an example. For if we're dealing with an autistic patient that is hypotonic, you've heard of that before, right? So their central tone is very poor, they're very flaccid. Well, we may do a postural exercise combined with a very specific frontal firing therapy, like what's called a saccade eye movement or a fast eye movement. It just creates a much more profound effect in the brain. Synaptogenesis, again, just going over some of the physiology of neuroplasticity here. Dendrite arborization, I don't want to get too crazy into all this science stuff. Arborization just means that once these pathways get large and healthier, they start to look like a tree, like a large tree. And that's what arborization means. That means the changes are being made in the physiological sense within the brain. And then there's something called synaptic pruning that occurs in the brain as well, where there's refinement and efficiency. The brain will kind of prune certain pathways if they're not used as much, activate other pathways and make them stronger, the ones that are being used more. So I hope you're taking a note of how intricate it is, and that you can leave here today and say, wow, neuroplasticity, there's a lot of physiology behind it. And whether it's for your own, loved one or friend or patient, and you understand, goodness, I'm on fire to try to induce this neuroplasticity because it is a real deal thing. And this is just a little diagram on neuroplasticity. Again, synaptic activation means we're doing a targeted therapy, whether it's in a clinical setting or whatever. If it's a very weak activation where it's something that's not done repetitively, targeted in a really robust fashion, that weak activation goes to die. It just doesn't have legs, nothing really occurs after that. With a strong repetitive activation, we start to see all those changes we talked about. The synaptogenesis, the immediate early gene responses, all those really cool things that occur in the brain. One thing you have to know is that these changes just don't go away when you're done. Okay, that's a really important thing to understand. We get that question all the time. So, when you're done with therapy, or when you're done with you guys doing therapy, do the effects just kind of go away? No, they don't. These changes persist, they last. So neuroplasticity is something that stays.